You know, most stories about how civilization got started begin in a pretty comfortable place, right? We think of fertile river valleys where life was good and farming was easy. But what if that whole story is wrong? Today, we're diving into a completely different origin story, one that argues civilization wasn't born from comfort at all. Instead, it was forged in the fire of climate catastrophe, driven by the incredible, awesome power of water.
This quote really gets to the very heart of it. Water is, of course, the source of all life, but as we all know, it can also be this unbelievably powerful force of destruction. So we're going to explore how our ancient ancestors had to deal with that duality, and how their struggle, their fight for survival, ended up changing the entire world forever.
Okay, so let's set the stage. I want you to picture the world at the end of the last ice age, maybe 15,000 years ago. This is not the green, lush world we know today, not even close. It was a planet of incredible extremes, a really harsh, but in its own way, very stable environment where humanity was, well, just barely clinging on.
And to really put that in perspective, try to imagine this. So much of the world's water was locked up in these massive continent-sized glaciers that the oceans were a staggering 130 meters. That's about 425 feet lower than they are today. Coastlines were in completely different places. The world map would be almost unrecognizable to us. Because of this, life was only really possible in very specific places. Humanity was basically trapped in this one narrow band of latitude. If you went any further north, you'd slam right into these giant ice sheets. Any further south, and you'd hit bone-dry, lifeless deserts. And right smack in the middle of this crucial survival zone, the Caspian Sea and the Turan Basin of Central Asia. And that is where our story begins.
And this brings us to this really powerful idea from the historian Arnold Toynbee, which is absolutely central to the theory we're talking about today. He said that civilization isn't what happens when life is easy. No, it's what happens when people face a massive existential problem and they're forced to innovate or die. It's a response to a challenge.
And boy, was humanity about to face the biggest challenge of its existence. An event so cataclysmic, so world-altering, it would be burned into our collective memory as the Great Flood, or Tufan. And, according to this theory, it would provide the spark that finally ignited civilization.
So what was the trigger? Well, this theory proposes something incredibly dramatic. A meteor striking the Earth and shattering a massive glacial ice dam up in the north. Now, this didn't just cause a river to overflow. No, this was something else entirely. It unleashed the entire contents of enormous glacial lakes, sending a literal wall of fresh water surging south, straight into the world's largest inland basin.
The sheer scale of what happened next is it's hard to wrap your head around. The water level in the Caspian Basin didn't just rise, it skyrocketed from 150 meters below modern sea level all the way up to 50 meters above it. That is a 200-meter vertical rise in water. It created this vast inland ocean, completely flooding over 1 million square kilometers of land. For the people who lived there, it was quite literally the end of their world.
But the challenges didn't stop with the flood. As the world continued to warm up and the glaciers finally retreated, the environmental pressures on the survivors completely flipped. The problem wasn't too much water anymore, the problem was not having enough.
You say after the deluge came the great drying. The climate just got hotter and hotter, more and more arid. That giant inland sea began to evaporate, leaving behind enormous salt flats and deserts. The only choice the survivors had was to migrate, to move to the foothills of the great mountain ranges and to scattered oases, the only places left where fresh water could still be found. This relentless pressure forced them to invent totally new ways to live.
And what's so fascinating is how this ancient crisis might be baked right into our language. This theory points to the ancient Turkic root word or Now, its original meaning was simple, a ditch or a trench, something you dig to protect yourself from water. But as people had to start working together to manage water, both floods and droughts, the word started to evolve. It came to mean a fort, and then a city, and finally, the very idea of social organization itself. It's wild to think that words we use every day, like urban and order, might trace their linguistic DNA all the way back to these first great water projects.
So this challenge, this great thirst, it led to what was really the pinnacle of their innovation. The survivors didn't just find a way to cope with the drought, they engineered a solution so brilliant, so ingenious, that it solved a seemingly impossible problem. And it's a solution that's still in use thousands of years later.
So, here was the fundamental engineering problem they were staring down. Their only reliable source of fresh water was the snowmelt coming from the high mountains.
But their settlements were tens of kilometers away, across a scorching desert where the summer temperatures topped 40 degrees Celsius, or about 104 Fahrenheit. An open-air canal? Forget it. The water would have evaporated almost instantly. So, how on earth did they do it?
They went underground. They invented something called the Carrés, which is basically a subterranean aqueduct. And the process was absolute genius. First, they'd find the water table high up in the foothills. Then, with incredible precision, they would survey a gentle, continuous downhill slope all the way to their settlement. Then they tunneled horizontally deep underground, connecting that tunnel to the surface with vertical shafts for air and for maintenance. And the result? A system that delivered cool, clean water across vast distances, powered by nothing more than gravity.
And the scale of this undertaking is it's mind-boggling. In just one region, the Turfan Basin, they built an underground network of these water channels that totaled 5,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that is longer than the distance from New York City to Los Angeles. This wasn't some small ditch. It was an ancient megastructure, and it was all built by hand.
You just don't build something like that by accident. I mean, it required a deep understanding of geology to even find the water in the first place, plus sophisticated mathematics and surveying to plot that perfect gentle slope. And, of course, incredible engineering skill to dig the tunnels. This was clearly the work of a highly organized, technologically advanced society.
Now, their amazing innovation allowed them to thrive for a long time, but the climate, it just kept changing. The Great Drying continued, and that led to the final, dramatic phase of this origin story, the dispersal of this incredible knowledge across the rest of the ancient world.
As their homeland in the Turfan Basin became more and more uninhabitable, these people had to migrate. And where did they go? Well, they moved towards the brand new regions of opportunity that were just starting to form as the world's sea levels stabilized. The fertile, water-rich deltas of the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Indus River. And here it is. This is the core of the whole theory. These migrants, they weren't showing up as primitive refugees with nothing. They came as masters of survival. They brought with them a complete toolkit for building a new world. Things like domesticated wheat and animals, these unparalleled skills in irrigation and water management, and the principles of social organization born from digging those Ur trenches that you need to build cities.
So what this explainer is really proposing is a radical new timeline. It all starts with the initial shock, that great flood, around 15,000 BCE. This forces the development of early agriculture in the oases. By 4000 BCE, they've completely mastered their environment with incredible engineering like the Carrés. And then finally, starting around 3000 BCE, they spread out, carrying these seeds of knowledge that would blossom into the great civilizations we all know: Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. Which really just leaves us with a powerful thought to end on. This story suggests that humanity's greatest leaps forward don't happen when we're comfortable. They happen when we're faced with an existential crisis that forces us to be creative and organized and frankly brilliant. It really makes you wonder, as we face our own immense climate challenges today, what incredible innovations we'll be forced to create in response.